a member of CARP, friendly to seniors, and a, what was I say, an advocate. So let's turn the airwaves over to John, and John, you've got some information there about CARP, the survey, and some other interesting things that are going on around town.
Thanks very much, Lionel. Some people call me other than an advocate, as you realize, but I think that environmentalist is something that I'm rather keen on being identified as, because really, if we don't look after our environment, what do we really have left? But there are many concerns in Sudbury, of course, right now, and a lot of them center around the environment, but also a number of concerns about city finances, about the fact that there's a number of projects underway, and many citizens are concerned. And CARP did a survey at our annual general meeting, and Lionel, you were there. It was quite an event. We had almost 200 people, and we did this survey, and we really wanted to determine a number of things about seniors. We wanted to look at healthcare and housing and transportation, and also looking at the situation downtown. You know, how many people come downtown? Is there concerns about downtown? It's very interesting. We found out that most of the seniors did have a doctor. However, many did go to clinics, and occasionally they go to the emergency department too. And you and I have both been there on occasion.
Yeah, I got to break in there. Better explain what CARP is.
CARP is the Canadian Association of Retired Persons. It's a national organization. We have a large chapter here in Sudbury. And mind you, you have to be maybe 50 plus. So I think they're called Zoomers. And some have Zoomed better than others, but nonetheless, it's very interesting to see that, well, one of the things that did come out is the fact that most seniors are unhappy about the tax rate in Sudbury and feel that any tax increase shouldn't be more than, say, 1.5%, which is interesting because if you're looking at maybe building a new arena or event center, whatever you want to call it, that would increase the taxes by about 2.2% itself. And then you'd add on the other tax increases, and you could end up with a fairly sizable tax bill. I think that's concerning a lot of folks as well too. So that's just one of the issues. Housing, people are concerned about housing. Now, we don't have the same situation here in Sudbury as they do in other parts of the country, notably Toronto and the Vancouver area. You can still buy a house here for a pretty reasonable price. But a lot of seniors, we found out from the survey, they want to stay in their own home as long as possible. And if they do move out of their home, they're looking primarily at moving to an apartment rather than a condo or another house. So that's an interesting consideration. And transportation, well, most seniors do still have their driver's license, interestingly enough, but they would take the bus if it was more convenient and a little bit less expensive. So, you know, last year we tried an experiment with seniors, giving them a free day to ride the bus, and that was discontinued. We also had a special seniors rate for parking, and that was discontinued. So a lot of these you might call frills that were available to seniors are no longer there, and that seems to be a big concern too. So that was just some of the things we did with the CARP survey, which has just gone to the media, by the way. And Hugh Crizel, who is our chair, has been very vocal, dealing with counselors, dealing with all these seniors issues. We have, as you know, something like 30,000 seniors above the age of 65, which is a pretty significant number. And most of these seniors vote. So, you know, we're rather surprised that council is not more receptive to the concerns of seniors. I was going to say needs, because seniors do have needs. And they have certain wants too, but I think their needs are probably more paramount than their actual wants. So that's just wanted to mention that has happened, and for those who are interested in the CARP organization, they just have to get in touch with us. We have our website, carpsudbury.ca, and they can go on there and find out all about the organization and maybe attend some of our meetings and maybe become involved as well. So that's the word from CARP. So I didn't want to carp on it too much, of course, but, but it is a great organization, and we do have all these seniors in town. And one of the things that I think that we want to remember in Sudbury that it's coming up very shortly, and that's the official plan. And the official plan did, until fairly recently, anticipate continued growth in Sudbury. And we're not sure if continued growth is going to really happen, because apparently the Minister of Finance said that our population is not likely to grow much up until the year 2041. And a recent report looking at all of Northern Ontario said that Sudbury could experience a population drop of up to 30,000 over that particular time period. So we're thinking that the official plan should actually look at all those other conditions as well, because if you're not looking at continued growth, it means that you may not have the assessment power to do all the things that you'd like to do as a city, maintaining your services and maybe even doing new things too. So I guess what I'm concerned about, and I know a few others are, is that our local government seems to be in a bubble at Tom Davies Square, and the upper management, and I'm not sure about the staff, but a lot of the upper management seem to be cruising along as if things are always going to remain exactly the same. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I think you have to read the fine print with the statistical report. It mentioned an 18% drop in population, and unfortunately you've got to really read and plumb deeper. That means there's an 18% drop in the peripheral communities of Sudbury. So that is going to be 30,000, but nevertheless it influences two aspects. One, the drop in population and the tax bases for peripheral communities, but also some of those individuals tend to gravitate towards major centres such as Timmins, North Bay, Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie. So these are some of the things, I think, the conundrums that our planners have to juggle no matter what way. But recent reports on questions regarding condominiums, and you noticed the lack of enthusiasm in Sudbury, my observation anyway.
Well, that's true. Well, I think our survey showed that I think we only had 4% of these individuals were considering moving to a condominium.
Well, the corollary for that is the fact that they're not being built, because one developer, one condominium owner, alluded to the fact that half of the tenants are rentals. And so, and then you start looking at the price tag of $300,000 to buy a condominium. So there's a lot of things stalled, like the Old General Hospital, the brewery, and of course new developments on apartments and condominiums. And
certain areas in town that have been allocated for that type of development seem to be stalled because, of course, you need a certain amount of what's upfront upfront money. People who are willing to put their money down on the condos before you can build them, and you need about, say, 40% of them financed. And if you don't get that, well, then you can't go ahead, and that seems to be a concern as well too. Yeah, so there's many factors that will govern. I would suspect, from my scant knowledge of the way municipalities are supposed to run, there's a lot of dependence on industrial commercial tax, and as that diminishes with a demographic shift, the burden then goes back onto the homeowners rather than commercial. And of course the question is, how much can you actually load onto the homeowners before they begin? I know in our survey some indicated that they would be considering the possibility of moving to another community, perhaps maybe for lower taxes or other amenities, and perhaps to be closer to relatives. So maybe the kids have moved away, they want to move closer to them. So that's always a consideration as well too. And the fact is that these 30,000 folks over the age of 65, and you and I are in that category, well, we made it this far, but we're not going to make it forever. So the possibility, I understand that last year we had 1,600 people pass into the beyond, and we don't have that number of births, of course, occurring, and we don't have that in migration. So if you look at those figures strictly from that point of view, it's not terribly encouraging with respect to the actual tax base you're going to be able to access in order to afford some of these projects that are currently on the books. Yeah,
I make, if people have sort of some kind of interest in the local news media, the newspapers, I would say keep a daily record or a weekly record of the births and deaths. And it's not a very good scientific indicator, but I would suspect it would give you a pretty good general knowledge of how the demographics of Sudbury are changing. And I know when I arrived in Sudbury in 1968, there was 1,000 people a week.
That's right.
Coming to town.
I remember that very well. Mind you, we almost had 1,000 leaving too.
Well, yeah, there was two. Yeah, we really needed 4 lanes in those days. But the fact is that we're running into some interesting planning dilemma as to a match of how we, I guess, take care of the population.
And actually, that sort of feeds into, you know, what do you do to increase the population? We've heard a number of you know, I guess what you might call wishes, perhaps. And a lot of them centered around, yes, we need to bring people in, but we have to provide jobs for them as well. Who these we are, we're not exactly sure, because obviously the government has done a good job in providing jobs for people here in Sudbury. We have about 230 more working in local government than we had before we amalgamated. We know the education system is still doing fairly well, although they don't have the same numbers as they used to have. Health services has done very well. They have an increase in population. But for the actual industrial base, you know, maybe we're running out of what we really were established for here in Sudbury, and that was for our mining. And that doesn't seem to be going to increase significantly over the next little while. So really, where are these jobs? We realize that people will come here if there's work, but where do the jobs come from?
Well, perhaps it may be wise to rather forget about trying to increase the population and focus on what the existing population can do in order to increase and improve the ambience and quality of living in Sudbury.
And that's why do people go to a community? I understand the CARP did a survey a while back, and they determined that people appreciate living in a community that has reasonable cost of living, has good health services, has a good artistic community as well too, and is close to an airport. Well, we almost satisfy all those. Oh, there is one other element, and that's the weather, which we can't do very much about, of course. And but you know, it seems to be that, in my own opinion, that just building buildings to feel that a building or a structure is going to attract more individuals to a community, I think is a rather interesting way of thinking, because I'm not sure that any particular building or structure, whether it be a new arena, an event center, a synergy center, a new library. Oh, and by the way, we had our survey indicated that most individuals, at least those over 65, are CARP people in this survey, in which we had 115 people surveyed, and the majority were not in favor of a new library and art gallery downtown. They weren't too sure about any other type of special buildings that would be occurring downtown, because I think they're concerned about the actual need and also the cost. With respect to an arena, that was a very interesting situation with respect to an arena, because we had, most people felt that maybe we do need a new arena, but most of them felt that it maybe should be in an area where there's enough parking for those who are going to attend an arena. And some people actually felt that, and there's nothing wrong with our present arena, and maybe I think there was some comment that perhaps that should be given to an entrepreneur. Just give the arena to an entrepreneur and see what they can do with it, maybe like Mr. Zulich, and see what they can do with it. Just give it to them and let them run it and see just how it works out at no cost to us.
Just going to take a quick break now for station identification. You're listening to CKLU 96.7 on your FM dial, and you're listening to Lionel's Vinyls. And I have to sort of do this every week. Sometimes I forget that opinions expressed on this show by anybody are not necessarily the views and the opinions of CKLU or Laurentian University. So having said that, I'm going to go back to John Lindsay, who is a member of the CARP, Canadian Association of Retired People, and also a bit of an advocate for seniors and other things around town. But another issue that came up, John, in the last week is and it's a cross between an aesthetic, environmental, health thing about salt contamination and salt runoff, not only of lakes in Sudbury, but it seems as though it's a concern everywhere.
It is, and I know that just returning from a trip down to Toronto there just 2 weeks ago, and passing by Perry Sound, we stopped in a restaurant, and in that restaurant there was a notice posted. Can't hold it up to the microphone here, but I'll just read it. It's very short. Drinking water advisory, public notice. This notice is to advise you that the water may be unsafe for persons on sodium-restricted diets. The water at this site has been tested for sodium in levels exceeding 20 milligrams per liter. Levels above 20 milligrams per liter might be unsafe for persons on sodium-restricted diets. To ensure safe drinking water, the medical officer of health recommends if you're on a sodium-restricted diet, use water obtained from an alternate safe driving source. So, you know, this is being posted, this is in the North Bay, Perry Sound area, from their health unit. Also, our own health unit is aware as well, too, that our drinking water from David Street water station, which is on Lake Ramsey, which serves between 50 and 60,000 people, is up now to 20 milligrams per liter, and the provincial level for notification is 20. So we're almost 3 times that. And really, people on sodium restricted diets, according to this, should not be drinking the water from Lake Ramsey.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm not too sure what happens here. We do draw some water from various sources. I think we've got Monopatay, one. There's wells in Garson, and there's a few municipal wells around, plus Ramsey Lake. And I wonder if they mix the water before they put it in the system to drink.
As I understand, there is certain mixing takes place. However, some water goes directly from the David Street station to areas, well, the 50 to 60,000 people. There's a huge reservoir, of course, in the Mineral Lake area that takes water from Monopatay. We understand some mixing, so we're not exactly sure when it comes out of your tap what is the actual, but we know that the ministry, the officer of the medical officer of health has advised all physicians in the area that those people who are drinking water from Ramsey Lake would be in that area above the 20 milligrams per liter.
Yeah, so there's 2 issues here. One is for homeowners or people living in apartments or whoever, seniors or people on sodium restricted diets, how would they ever find out? Who do they contact? But there's the other issue, what I know from what little grade 8 chemistry I ever took. Once you put salt in the water, it's one dickens of a job to get it out. The easiest way is to boil it until you end up boiling off all the water, and you end up with salt, which is completely unreasonable.
It's almost impossible to do on a huge basis. So you're sort of stuck with it, really, once it's there.
Once it's there, yeah, and you've got 2 things that happens. It accumulates. If you have a huge body of water over time, the runoff, I guess, accumulates in that body of water because you don't change 100% of that water every time it rains, but also you've got ground saturation and also downstream contamination.
This is really something that I think that maybe we often hear that phrase, the elephant in the room, right? But in this case, I think that the elephant is in the room, the elephant is in the lake, the elephant is in the water we drink. And it's true that for most of us who are not on sodium restricted diets, it's not really a concern. But what the concern is that, you know, for those people who are, it's obviously a concern that they shouldn't be consuming any more additional salt than they absolutely have to in order to maintain life. because we all need salt, of course, in our diets. It's the excess amount of salt that's really problematic for people who have heart conditions, who are diabetic, and also if you reach a certain level. Now this is an interesting point, and this is what we brought up to the city because they're doing a watershed study at the present time. They showed a graph at a recent information session, and they did show this level of 200 milligrams per liter, which is the point where it actually tastes like salt. You're actually feeling it, you're actually tasting salt water. So they use that level, but that is not the level, that's the level that's recommended by the province, that the health officials should notify people that there's a danger, and that's the 20 milligrams per liter. And at the rate that it's growing now, and I think, Lionel, you're being more of a scientist than I am, you can see that the chloride levels and the sodium levels over a period of time, perhaps as short as 10 to 20 years, are going to be way above the provincial standards, even for aesthetic quality, and that also harms the aquatic life as well.
Yeah, from what little training I claim to have, there's a definite need for hydrological study of the whole region, because the salt can, to avoid getting sunburn, you get out of the sun or put on sunscreen. To avoid contaminating your wells, the fresh water system, I guess the simple answer is don't put any more salt in there.
And that's the other question is, how do you avoid putting more salt in? We know that the city has said that, okay, we're going to try to use less, and we're going to use brine to put on the road to try to remove ice during the wintertime. Well, brine is really just salt dissolved in water, is it not? So I believe so. You're doing the same thing exactly. So a number of groups have gotten together in town, a number of environmental groups, people concerned with lake water quality, and have written to the Minister of the Environment saying, with respect to our new plan for traffic in the area and new roads, and some of those new roads would be in the watershed of Ramsey Lake. They'd be a Ramsey Lake Road, they'd be the Howe, Bellevue, Bancroft corridor on the north side of the lake, Ramsey Lake Road on the south side of the lake. And these roads are planned to be expanded probably to 2 to 3 times their present size, which would mean, if you just do simple mathematics, that would be 2 to 3 times more salt deposited into the watershed. Now we had the situation, of course, where we built the new parking lot over there for the hospital. Guess where all that water goes? With the salt off the cars and the trucks that are parked there, of course.
Yeah, I think what I think the most important thing is, and I guess the medical profession has some responsibility here, and people who are on salt-restricted diets are concerned, is how can they have their water tested for salt? How do they know? Like we live in a large community, and Canada is one of those wonderful places. With few exceptions, you can just simply turn on the tap anywhere and drink the water. However, we know that the water comes from a variety of sources, so therefore there's no guarantee of what the chemical content of that water is. So how can people find out if they are in a serious situation that they're on salt-restricted diets, find out what's coming out of the tap?
We know that we have a pretty good system here with respect to water treatment, and it removes all the bad bugs that might be in the water, but of course any method that we have to make sure our water is safe for drinking does not remove the salt. And that I guess is the situation we're really facing, and we just want to bring this to the attention, which doesn't seem to be top of mind really with the city officials that are concerned. We're not even sure if the health unit is really as concerned as they should be. I know we've talked to them, and they seem to say, well, that 200 milligrams per liter is one of the provincial standards. That is one of the provincial standards when the water begins to taste like you're drinking salt water. But that 20 milligrams per liter is the level at which people have to be informed. The health unit does have the responsibility informing physicians, who in turn must inform people who are on salt-restricted diets that their drinking water that could harm their health.
Yeah, but the reality is though, I mean, do people contact the health unit, or do they contact their counsellor? Do they contact City Hall?
Well, I think that what happened, if you recall back a few years ago when we really pressed the health unit to do more public exposure, if you want to use that term, with respect to restaurants and the number of inspections and perhaps deficiencies that were found during their inspections. And the health unit really resisted that for a while. I know in Toronto they actually post on the restaurants, on the door of the restaurant, a certain level of responsibility, I guess, to maintaining a clean establishment. Here we don't do that, but you can go online, you can go to the health unit online and check each establishment to find out, you know, what deficiencies there's been over the past number of years. It'd be nice, you know, to have that maybe posted on the doors of restaurants as well too, but we don't do that here. We think that the same thing has occurred, in my opinion, same thing has occurred with respect to the salt. It's something that's sort of flown under the radar. And now that the watershed study is taking place, we're a little concerned, of course, with this watershed study, because really the watershed study is being done under the auspices of the roads department. And Mr. David Shelstad, who's director of roads, is responsible for the watershed study. So it's not exactly like putting the fox in with the hens, but you know, we're really wondering, is this a drainage survey? Is it a watershed survey? Are they concerned about the health? Are they concerned about salt loadings? You know, these are the issues I think that we want to raise as environmentalists, and I think it's our responsibility, because generally the public is always far ahead of both politicians and generally those people who are in responsible positions in government. The bureaucracy, citizens are always ahead of that, and generally the politicians and management generally follows the concerns that the public might have.
But there is one fallacy that I've observed personally, and everybody says, well, you can check online. And that's assuming a number of things. First of all, you're in an area where you've got access to the internet. The second thing is, it makes the assumption that you've got a computer or a smartphone.
That's right.
The third thing is that it assumes that people wish or want to know how to use these devices, and also whether they have the means to pay for the connection, because I think the minimum charge for a smartphone is about $50 a month.
I know we've been saying for years, and CARP has advocated, and Friendly to Seniors and the Arts Council and so on, has advocated a community guide be issued twice a year that would include all this particular type of information, from arts information to community guides to waste pickup, to the various departments, to tourism. And this guide would include that particular information that we're talking about with respect to healthy drinking water. How often do you see a notice in the paper that says, if you want to check on your restaurants in town, you know, with respect to how many deficiencies they might have had with respect to handling food, go to this website or whatever, even that. So these things seem to be under the table, and it's our responsibility as environments to make sure that they're off the table, that they're into the public consciousness.
Yeah, the other reality, of course, is you even go within the jurisdiction of the Sudbury Health Unit, which goes down to the St. Charles, French River, goes, I think, to Manitoulin and places like that. And I know in many of those areas, the Northern Life never makes it.
No, it's true.
And in some of those areas, I think even the Sudbury Star. So you were really sort of shooting in the dark if you're trying to inform people through that medium. Like you say, a notice to each household, perhaps it could be stuck in with the tax bill, which they tell you can get online, I guess.
Or your hydro bill, or your electric bill, or whatever. There are certain things that are distributed. Also, the news media has a responsibility, but you know, here in town, our media has been decimated. There is no investigative reporting that takes place, hardly anything at all. Reporters barely have time just to take information that's given to them and to print that. So you know, we are. I think that in a broad sense, our democracy has been weakened by the fact that we do not have that information that we used to have and the media didn't have, and does not now have the opportunity to dig in and to ask those questions. Why? I mean, we see a news story and it comes out, and nobody really, well, what's the story behind the story?
Got to tell everyone now, we're listening to Lionel's Vinyls on CKLU 96.7 on your FM dial. This morning we have a guest, John Lindsay, who is a member of the Canadian Association of Retired People, Persons, Sudbury chapter, and I guess it's also national, friendly to seniors, environmental advocate, and all other things. Now we've kind of floated the salt bit.
And if you put enough salt in, you can float too.
Yeah. Well, you may realize that you can float better in Ramsey Lake one day. But the fact of the matter is what other sort of glaring issues occur to you that is a problem with the Canadian Association of Retired People?
Well, I think that, I just want to mention, I think that most Sudburyans and our older citizens are very proud of this community. They feel that, Sudbury's come a long way. We're happy to live here. We know that, I recall that just a few weeks ago you sent me something giving the good reasons why Sudbury is a wonderful spot to live and to work if you have a job, and to play, and it's true. And we have a website called friendlysudbury.ca, and we've listed some of those things about friendlysudbury.ca, and we're hoping to use this website to put more information on about some of the things we've been talking about. And anybody who's interested, we have a Friendly Sudbury CA button for them too if they want to get in touch with us. Just go on our website and friendlysudbury.ca. Lionel, here's your button. Yeah. And this is because we think that Sudbury, I think that we've lost a certain amount of friendliness that we used to have a few years ago. People used to say, Sudbury's a really friendly spot. And I think that it's not that we're unfriendly now, but I think there's some of that edge has been taken off somewhere. And I think that generally is concerned by some of the things we've talked about, we're not quite as prosperous as we were at one time, and yet we still want to do big things. So the question is, how can we do big things economically without raising our taxes, which is probably the biggest concern that seniors have. Health concerns, of course. We know that once we get into the hospital, we're pretty well looked after. Emergency department is a little tight at times, but we do have good people working at the hospital. They can look after us fairly well. We have some concerns about transportation around the community because we're serving such a huge area. We, of course, are a little concerned about what direction we're taking to do the good things for all our people in our community, from the young people right through to the older folks. And what are the small things that we can do? We seem to be nickel and diming with respect to certain areas of what you might call sort of attributes. In other words, cutting down the fees that young people have to pay to partake in some of the recreational activities, or raising those service fees. It seems like when council or the staff is asked by council to come up with savings, they seem to sort of, we're going to increase our service fees, which really doesn't increase the quality of life. But they seem to have no problem about, okay, we'll spend a few million or more than a few million on building a new road in the north part of the city, which we're not sure anybody's ever going to drive on. Or we're going to increase our transportation in other areas with expanding roads and building new roads. Now, how do you do this when you have a declining population and a tax base that is shrinking at the same time? And this seems to have escaped both those in the sort of the bubble that we have at Tom Davies Square, both those people that we elected to represent us responsibly, and that means responsibly financially as well. And we have the management that seems to be saying, well, we're okay, we don't have any problem. We're getting our 2.5% of raise each year, and we've got a good defined benefit pension plan, and we're fairly happy. What's the matter with the rest of you? Well, the rest of us out there are living on fixed income. We're not sure about Well, I'm pretty happy with our present library. Do we really need a new library? You know, I mean, all these questions are seemingly coming up by the people who we represent, and these are the, now, and I'm thinking that not only the 30,000 older folks, you know, have concerns in this area, but I think that other people in the area, those, and you know, we have a lot of individuals now who are not making a whole lot of money. Now, the real estate market is pretty stable, so it's possible for people on relatively limited means to be able to afford apartments and be able to afford some of the homes that are coming on the market, because of the fact that some of the older folks are moving out of those homes. So we're not that bad, really, but I think we have to look at the whole matter of our taxation. We're looking right now at some 2-point-something% without adding on any possible new costs for a new arena or a new synergy center or a new library. These things seem to be legacy projects that I'm wondering if our elected representatives are doing it for the glory of their term in office, or are they really being responsible with respect to the dollars that are being expended in this way?
Well, one of the things that I observe from user fees is that it becomes exclusionary. In other words, as the fees go up, people leave the market.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people leave the market, the cost of sustaining whatever service then is thrown on the burden of the people who do show up.
Yeah, so it's a sort of diminishing returns almost.
Exactly.
And, you and I, of course, we've had some hobby horses we've been riding for a few years. One is the moving the parking meters to the side of the buildings rather than having them out on the curb side. And you know, when you look at Timmins, for example, Timmins is, I think, has done this, and they also have, in large measure, put in a number of meters that you can access from your smartphone. And so I'm talking to you, and I realize, oh my golly, I only put in a half an hour instead of an hour. So I get on my phone, and I can update my deposit into the meter. I think there's a 35-cent charge for doing that, of course, so that the municipality doesn't lose any money. But and other communities as well seem to be, and I know with respect, if I can get this in, with respect to Second Avenue, there's an interesting situation. You and I both were involved there. And we looked across the country to see if there's, and into the States as well too, where we came up with an example from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where they actually had reduced a 4-lane road to a 3-lane road, and they reduced the speed on that road 8 to 10 miles per hour. I don't know if that translates to kilometers, but that's pretty significant. They had bike lanes on it. They could access the bus transit people were happy. The people in the neighborhood were happy, and we suggested that as a safer alternative. We really suggested a roundabout, which we felt would be the ideal safe, because I know that we have intersection accidents all the time, and the larger the intersection, the more accidents you have. One in Kathleen and Notre Dame is a good example. 2 days ago I passed there, once again wreckage all over the road, somebody making a left-hand turn, and ran into 3 other cars, I think it was at the time, or at least 2 others. I think one ran away from the scene. But in any event, big intersection, big accidents. And that's what we tried to tell the city. That's not the safe way to go. Smaller intersections, you know, narrower lanes. You know, you don't build a 5-lane superhighway in a residential area. But that's what the city has decided to do, because they're using old thinking. Old thinking does not work in the new environment. And so we offered these solutions, but nevertheless they've gone ahead, and we'll see the results as well. At a cost, of course, far greater than it would have been had they listened to other alternatives.
Well, I guess if you use the magic of the internet, you don't have to travel very far. So we're going to have to wind up, because I'm going to have to go to messages pretty soon, and if I don't do that, I'll get fired.
I think that you're going to have another guest in the short time that's going to talk more about the salt issue, I believe. Someone who actually lives and drinks that water.
Yeah, and we've got other interviews that's going to come down the line over the next few months, because now our transmitter, our antenna, is being I guess, decontaminated.
So are we actually on the air?
We're on the air, and the gremlins have been dealt with, and we're broadcasting. We're still going to do some more fix-up, but nevertheless, we're on. We're working, and anyone that's listening, perhaps John, you'll agree. If you're concerned about what's going on in the city, get a hold of your councillor. That's one phone call, and if you're not getting satisfaction, I think 1 year. And
something's coming up. One of the things we can't understand is why don't the councillors hold ward meetings like the CARP group? We did a survey of people who came out to our meeting. Why not have ward meetings where the councillors can actually talk to individuals rather than, because they say to us, we've been talking to our constituents. Well, we don't, have they? We don't know.
Yeah, well, okay, before we go to our noon hour commercials, to wind up, John, in a couple of words, can you précis what we've been talking about?
Well, I want to thank you, of course, for having us here with you and the work you're doing, and especially I know it's going to be more important as we move towards the election next year and some of the concerns that many citizens have. And this is really one venue that people to have the opportunity in which to express how they feel, and not all of us agree with everything, of course. So it's good to have differing viewpoints as well too, and I think this is going to be valuable. I know that looking at a number of the issues that we've talked about, and of course the one that seems to be paramount that we're really concerned about now is the increased salt loading on our major drinking water source here in Sudbury, and I think this is going to be a major issue going forward.
Well, thanks a lot for coming in, John, and I'll remind everybody that CKLU is a community, a true community radio station. It's run and operated by volunteers, and we have quite a big staff of volunteers, believe it or not, and we all do our thing for the community. And thanks, Mr. John Lindsay, for coming in and giving us some insights of what's going on around town. And if you have any concerns, don't phone me or any other radio station. Phone your councillor and maybe write a letter or two. So without more ado, we're going to have to now go to some messages and then on to some music after those messages. You're listening to Lionel's Finals on CKLU 96.7 on your FM dial. Production